don't pretend to say that you thought of something this week when you didn't. Start the process now. I promise you it will really help you. Frederick will talk to you about your projects, and if you've got a way of recording what Frederick says, ask his permission if you want to do a video, or not video, but a voice recording. Capture everything that happens from now on in your diary, because your diary is like the primary text of your report. Okay, you can use as much of the diary as you want, especially in section 4 on your handout. Teflon, you've got one there. Section 4, project development. Refer to your creative design process. Now, if that's a daily, weekly extract from your diary, that's fine. How did you develop your project? Well, the daily, weekly notes that you make on the development of your project can be taken from your diary, which might be written in Korean, it might be written in Swedish, and it can be translated. It can be rewritten into English language. Okay, that's fine. Like I said, nobody will ever see the writing I do before I come to work. It's mine. It's my process. Okay, so I'm writing in English, but I'm unfortunate in the sense that I only speak English. Outline any changes you make to the project. The better reports will address the changes. Okay? If you know what you're going to put on the wall in July, now, are you making the best use of your creative time? I would say that if you are recording those changes in your diary, it'll be very easy to write about them in your project report.
Yeah, it's a positive thing that the journey might change. Your thinking change, your process change. That's part of kind of talking about our project. Or if it doesn't change, it doesn't. But it's part of how it evolves.
Yeah, why things might change might be technical, they might be material, they might be conceptual. They might be just through the process of knowing more about something, or responding to new research, a new piece of inspiration. You know, it's never like this, is it? It's never like that. Never is it like, oh, I was inspired there, and I did my project there. That's not how it works. It's much more like that. You know, and how you feel about it as well. Like, you might be having a really, I'm going to swear, but you might be having a really awful time about your project. You might like have lost interest. You might be, people say, you know, you might be confused. You might lose direction. You might lose interest. If that's in your diary, it's going to make for a better report. It's going to help you find your way back to something. And it's okay to not be 100% happy with your work all of the time. That's the most important thing to recognize, that if your diary marks challenges that you've faced, creative, conceptual, technical challenges, that's going to really help you. You'll be able to look back and say, oh yeah, I made that breakthrough. I thought I was going to do that, but I didn't. I did this instead. And that process is really, really important. And it shows you the level of individual oversight you have, individual control that you have. I'm going to bring Frederick in a moment, because the next one, how did making inform your thinking, and vice versa? Oh. When we run this module in previous years, we we haven't always had a pre-master studio. So a lot of the pre-master sessions were run from the workshop. And it's probably the best example I have for what this might mean, and vice versa. I guess it's a bit like this, just to borrow Tintin space. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that laptops, they look like thinking, but certainly the making could be on the laptop as well. But if you imagine the laptop being in a technical space, like the workshop, that's kind of how we might see it, okay? The process of making is also something that you can think about as and when you're doing it. So find a way of recording how those processes are happening, okay? Documenting, yes, photography, but yes, notes. And if those notes are part of your practice, if those notes are regular at the same time as you make something or you design something, you'll be able to do two things. You'll be able to make and write at the same time. That's what it means to me. I don't know if you've got any other examples.
I mean, I think it's when you say / designing, you know, as the same thing, you know, in reality. We don't necessarily talk about physical making all the time, but it's the creative process of producing, visualizing something, and actively going through that process, whatever medium that might be, that's kind of live with you. And it's not just a record for the sake of saying, look, I did this, but it's much more an opportunity for you to look back on it and think, yeah, I did do this, and I went through these steps, and the outcome was like that, and in reality, you know, another time, another universe, another moment, I might, or later on that week, or later on an hour later, or 2 years later, 5 years later, you might choose other processes or similar processes because you have seen yourself from the outside going through these creative processes where things manifest themselves when they're not in your head, but they are literally becoming, and they become things that you can twist around and look at and hold on a long distance or keep very close to you or share with friends and tutors and others, you know, and they are manifesting themselves, and that's when they, you know, they exist to be scrutinized in another way than when they are in your head. You know, theoretically, anything you can think can be perfect because nobody's going to argue with it, not even ourselves often, which is the really kind of fun thing. We don't argue with our own heads about our design ideas. And if we do, we often stop them. We suppress that little voice and we do nothing. And that's very hard to write about that nothing. It becomes a very different type of report. And it doesn't become so much about creative process, and it might become more about personal experience, which is interesting but not really completed the project. Yeah.
It's a really interesting point. Frederick and some of the architecture tutors, we've been discussing how students feel at the beginning of a project where they're thinking. I can't stress this enough. If you're thinking, do something. Do something. Let's see it. Let yourself see it. Get something from the inside of your head. Okay? International students, I think art students, I think it's a what we teach here in order to prepare you for university at multiple levels, but at pre-master's level, you know that you have control over your thought process, but you also know that if you don't do anything with that thought process, something else kind of comes over the top of it. And it's stuck in the head, it's forgotten, it's replaced with something. So what I'm saying is take steps to record every single part of that process, okay? Find a way of extracting it from the inside of your head into your diary, onto separate paper. For me, it's first thing in the morning, it's 500 words if I'm on a good day. If I'm not on a good day, it's less. I don't worry about that. I just keep coming back day after day. Okay? And then you'll be surprised by how much you can look back, and then the project report becomes a collating exercise. So 5,000 words is not very much if you think about the time of the year it is now. It's the beginning of May, so you've got essentially 2 months. 2 months to do a regular daily reflection, a regular daily diary entry on how your project is going, and then you use the parts of that to compile your report. Okay? Nothing is final. Do not, never know what you're doing. Always be open to things being changed. Don't finish what you're doing. Start again something. If you think something is ready to show someone, show them. But in that process of showing, what more can you do with it? Okay? It'll be a better process for you, it'll be a better report for you if you do not consider things being finished, but actually engage with the process of developing a pathway-specific response to your question. Okay?
That including the practical work too.
Yeah.
You know, don't slow down and start anticipating ending the year with a perfect piece. We'd rather see you overshooting things and thinking, whoa, I have loads of stuff I haven't got to yet. But you have a lot with you when you enter master level. When you think, oh, I have lots of things that are still interesting, that I haven't kind of closed everything down and wrapped it up and, you know, boxed it in. But it's something that instead generate, you know, and if we talked about yesterday, the project, you know, what is the outcome of the year? The outcome of the year is primarily the portfolio and your own insights into your own processes and getting to know yourself as creative, productive, reflective individuals, and this is part of it. But it means that it shouldn't end when you leave Lübeck. It shouldn't end the last day of term. It should be, that day should hardly be seen. It's just, you just happen to show me and you where you are. You happen to have a insightful report where you probably get more out of it by writing it than you put into it for years ahead.
I've just written on 6 here, find routine in experimentation. Okay, so what I mean by that is keep exploring technical, practical possibilities. Find a routine in that, because people like me and Frederick and organisations like Lübeck will, and especially art and design language, the language around art and design, it'll always be this: drafts, tests, alternatives, mistakes, experiments. Mistakes. Imagine that up until this point, you understand mistakes being bad, or things to avoid. But in actual fact, in art and design, mistakes are glorious alternatives. You have to try things. You have to experiment. Things have to go wrong for us to know how to make them right, or how to perfect what we were looking at. And then again, it's not finished. So that process of constantly referring back to what your aims or intentions were for the material, for the project itself, for the location, for the client, for the message, for the formal laws that you were analysing, for urban design, graphic design, sequential design. Constantly question those as well as questioning yourself. Okay? Now, you can't really write section 5 just yet, can you? You can't conclude something, but you can start to think about what you're doing this for. yes, you're doing it for a module, yes, you're doing it for your pre-masters, but what's the aim of it? Now, you've done a lot of research into that and the context in your literature review, but what do you want to get out of it? What's the purpose of this work that you're putting together? So even though you can't write your conclusion yet, you can certainly think about what the conclusion could be. What would be the ultimate conclusion? What would be the ultimate evaluation? So you have something to test yourself against, and then look, it's 500 words. If that's 500 words summarizing the highlights of your project, bringing together sections that have already been written, that's fine. Okay? But the evaluation is up to you. What is the criteria for a successful graphic design project? Are two sequential design illustration projects the same? When we're conducting research into a particular area, we might already have some criteria that tell us how successful something could be. So even though you can't write the conclusion because you haven't done the project yet, you can set up the project, you can set up the conclusion. Okay? Up there. Thing. There's the date for you. 9th of July.
The last submission of the whole.
We know that's a summative. The last thing I've got for you is the sort of calendar of weekly events, because I'm aware that we would normally be thinking about Advanced Art Design and Media on Thursday afternoon, but my thought was better to give you this now while it's still possible to kind of continue the momentum from your literature review, and also that gives us a bit more time with Camilla on Monday. Okay, so you've still got Camilla for this, and Camilla will go through all of the sections individually. She will tell you the different types of writing that we might